Well, good evening, good day, wherever you are. It's me, Heidi, and welcome to my channel. First off, I would like to remind you that according to the channel statistics, 61.2% of my viewers are not subscribed. Hence, only 38.8% are subscribed. So please, just first off, before we go on, leave a subscribe. But if you prefer to watch until the end and do the subscription and like of this video after the stream, please feel free to do so. Now, transgender, what it is and what it isn't. Very often, being transgender is misconceptualized as as having something to do with sexual orientation, which it does not. This is a mistaken belief of what was thought of being transgender, what it was about, even back in the 90s, as late as 2000s for some. For decades, being transgender was called being transsexual, but this was due to the medical conceptions back in the day in 40s, 50s, 60s, etc., when the medical field couldn't quite put one on one together and see not just beyond the biology. Being transsexual, it was referred to. The main reason back then was because it was seen as a sort of a deviant of the binary biological sex, being going from one to the other. But quite often, especially in 40s and such, the transsexuals, what they were called back then, which we would call transgender now, were thought of being just gay, queer. At least in medicine, in the medical field, they were, in psychiatry and such, they were considered to be just gay men, being, for example, trans women were just gay guys, which is obviously not true. That is very, very wrong on very many levels, and and there is, of course, also the social aspect of the gender. It's not being transgender. It's not just the biology. It's also there's a psychological side to it. Not just the sort of the medical transitioning. There's a gender identity in all of us, whether it be cis, trans, non-binary, or the lack of this, what do you want to call it, gender identity, really. And I would like to share something with you, with your lovely lot. Now, there we go. This was something I sorry about that. I lost myself there. Trying to share stuff to you, lovely lot. So, what I came last summer, I was in a debate on a channel called Agree to Disagree. It's run by lovely Creaky Blinder and Conspiracy Cats. Conspiracy Cats was one of my guests. He was actually my first guest on this channel, and this is one of the slides I showed the audience during this debate. Gender identity is a person's deeply felt inherent sense of being a boy, a man, or a male, a girl, woman, or female, or something else. Gender queer, gender non-conforming, gender neutral, or that may or may not correspond to this person's sex as per assigned by birth, which quite often is just the best guess when it comes to assigning a legal sex for the child. And as we will come to see, there is much more than just the guess of the midwife or the doctor or the doula who has a look at this poor child's genitalia, which is not the right guess. Now, often it's back in the this term transgender was really coined by a psychiatrist named John F. Olivan back in 1965 in his work Sexual Hygiene and Pathology. It's quite an interesting piece of, shall we say, science, what was called science back then, but isn't really called such back then. It wasn't as such a real delve, but we know what the times were in psychiatry with disabled people. It was hard, and writing that the term, which was known prior to early 60s, the term used back then was transsexualism. But he wrote in his 1965 reference work, he wrote of transsexualism that it is misleading. Actually, transgenderism is meant by this word, and it's because sexuality is not a major factor in primary transvestism, which in this case primary transvestism was, this referral to it was transvestism was quite often equal to the term transgender, because they saw it just as what they saw it as was just a cis female dressing up as a guy, or a lesbian cis female wanting to sort of, what these TERFs nowadays say, that they just act up, but being a transvestite is different from being transgender, because when it comes to the difference of these two is the fact that typically transvestites do not feel the need to do any transitional treatments, from whether it be from male to female or female to male, whereas transgender people, most, however not all, feel the need to feel the need to transition in some way or another at some point in their life due to gender dysphoria. And then in this transgender, this was then popularized later. However, there is no as such, there is no consensus widely accept. There's no universal consensus whether which is appropriate, transsexual or transgender, because in this context, sex refers to the biological sex, and there are trans people, quite a bit of trans people who identify. I've spoken to one who identifies as a transsexual female. This person is quite a bit from the older generation, and so when this person was young or growing up, that was a term. But however, I do not doubt her identity. But in this case, the primary motivation for people to use this term transsexual is that it entails that these people wish to have at least some reassigning, like medical procedures, whether it be just the gender reassignment surgery. Some call it sex reassignment surgery. Whether it be just that one, whether it be hormones, other treatments, or perhaps mastectomy, orchiectomy, for example. These oftentimes these people prefer the not all, but some prefer the term transsexual because it refers to the medical procedures. As per the transgender health program at Fenway Health in Boston, they have some questionnaire data, as I understand it, that this is from their studies, that there's no universal definition for all, and a universally accepted umbrella term even. And there is often, I've noticed this personally, that there is sort of confusion as to which term is appropriate to use. Whether it be transsexual, transgender, and how it should be used. If it would be just as a my understanding is that in English language it's used as a noun, not an adjective. Which X is transgender versus transgendered, which the first one is or should be correct. There is, as I said, this confusion because there are terms that were popular in as early as early 21st century that would be now considered offensive. There's a research, or was an American researcher named Harry Benjamin, who invented this sex orientation scale, which is, as I understand it, now used to measure, if it can even be measured, the scale of sexual orientation within cisgender people. But when this was developed, this Mr. Benjamin, he used this scale to assign what were called transsexuals and transvestites into several categories, and then based on their reason for shall we say cross dressing, and then again the relative urgency of the reassignment surgery, which wasn't really an option, at least a viable option in those days. Mind you, this was in the 40s and 50s. So the first, as I understand it, the first gender reassignment surgeries took place in late 1920s, early 1930s. So they had the World War II in between. The first ones in late 20s, early 30s or so, and then these studies, 40s, 50s, 60s. So for me, this wasn't obviously a good option. This is not a sexual orientation. It's a common misconception because it has the word sex in it, transsexual. Hence, many people get confused as to what it really has to do. It's the inherent feeling of one's gender within each of us. We each have an inherent feeling of gender, of which gender we belong to, or whether or not, or if you are agender, you will come to see that you do not feel you belong to any or gender doesn't apply to you. But in the case of being transgender, it does not have anything to do with sexual orientation. Now, of course, there is a trend to include under the umbrella term trans. There is a tendency to include non-binary, androgyny, being transvestites, cross-dressing, drag, and such under the umbrella term trans, which isn't really always the best option, and especially some non-binary people I've met in my life do not identify as trans or wish to be classified as a trans person. And the concept of this this gender identity that differs from what the vast majority of people out there feel. And it's back in the day, trans people however, in being non-binary, androgynous, trans person, many people often think that the sexual orientation and the gender identity with transgender people goes in hand, which is not always the fact. That if let's say a trans woman pre-transition, she is straight. When I transitioned, there were people who, because I had been in relationships with women only, up until that point, I had only had relationships with women. Hence, it seemed as if I was straight, and some assumed that I would automatically be straight. I mean, i.e., attracted, because I was seemingly attracted to the opposite sex of what I was assigned at birth. So I would be, after transition, I would also be attracted to the opposite sex, that I now would be legally female. So I'd be attracted to guys now, because I had been perceived as straight, which, by the way, I wasn't straight back then, even back then. Now, the sexual orientation is defined as follows. Sexual orientation is an individual's enduring physical, romantic, emotional, or spiritual attraction to other person. And then this entwines into being trans. But the gender identity is the person's sense of gender, whether it be male, female, non-binary, whatever this you wish to be, refer yourself to. And this is from a study from Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, GLAD. Yes. So this is as they would want to put it. Now, I highly recommend Belgian beer Leffe. It's not paid marketing, shall we say. Now, people sometimes think that often think that drags might be, this just popped into my mind, that drags are also, which because there are in my notes here, that because drags often they do express themselves typically to the opposite, the role of the opposite gender. We have drag kings and queens, and this is often mistaken that the drags would have a trans identity. Some do, some don't, but it's not really an automated case. And as I mentioned a bit ago about the sexual orientation when it comes to transgender people, it's fluid, and it's not. There is quite a bit of diversity when it comes to transgender, the sexual identity or the sexual orientation of trans people, transgender people in particular. And from 2015, the National Center for Transgender Equality from the United States of America conducted a survey, and there was a 27,715 transgender and non-binary people, of whom 21% said queer is the best described, describes their sexual orientation, and from then 18% identified as pansexual, 16 said gay, lesbian, or same gender loving, 15% said straight, 10 said asexual, 14 bisexual. And from a Canadian study of 2,873 respondents when it came to sexual orientation, 13% identified as asexual, 28% as bisexual, 13 as gay, 15 as lesbian, 31% pansexual, 8% as straight or heterosexual, 4 identified as two-spirit, which is a sort of third gender, social a social third gender with the native people of the native people or the native tribes of North America. So they have this concept of two spirits, and 9% identified as unsure or questioning. These are somewhat. For example, we have some. These differ somewhat, these percentages, but however, there is a quite a bit of variety when it comes to these the sexual orientation of trans people. But as we see here, these do not correlate these do not correspond with the binary trans identity of these people. And so that that the sexuality of transgender people is a whole other thing we could go into, or I could go into. Maybe I could have a stream about the sexuality of trans people. I don't know. Leave me a comment in the chat, in the side chats. Which direction is it? But however, leave me a comment in the chat. And if you are watching replay, please let me know if you would want to see a Fact Friday Friday Facts episode on the sexuality of transgender people. I would be more than happy to do that at some point. If my dear viewers do want it, I will when I have the opportunity. But hey, Arthur, how are you? How are you, my dear friend? I hope you are well and dandy. Anyway, please feel free to ask questions. If you have questions, comments, or whatever you might have that you wish to ask, comments, whatever, and I will pick them up. Like Arthur's comment here, I will pick them up. As I go along, I'll pick up when I see the questions coming, and of course I'll answer the best I can. I'll answer the best I can, and if it's comments, I'll take it up anyway. And so there is the issue. Of course, there's the issue. As when I was starting, I mentioned the psychiatric issue, the psychiatric treatments that trans people were subjected to in the past, or they were somewhat weird kind of, and also horrible medical forced medical procedures some decades ago, when trans people were transgender people and gay people, lesbians and such, were sent to psychiatric hospitals, given all sorts of horrible treatment. But now when it comes to the physical treatment of trans people, it's much better. In previous decades, it was really hard to get any treatment when it comes to transitioning, any kind of treatment, hormones to begin with. Now, nowadays there are several different options available. There is the hormone treatments, obviously, and for example, for guys it's testosterone, for women it's estrogen and testosterone blockers. We have laser hair removal and all kinds of treatments to counteract the effects of the puberty, of the biological sex or the sex or gender assigned at birth. Now, of course, these are unfortunately not available for everyone, which is really, really sad. Um, Even more importantly are the mental health issues that trans people have to go through. There are depression, social issues, self harm, all kinds of things, because they are being bullied, ostracized, shunned because they're trans. And that's one of the tough sides. That is one part of the reality, what it is being trans. Unfortunately, but I there is I think there's lights at the end of the tunnel. But still, the medicalization of being trans, it's still still ongoing, and I can't understand why it should be a medical issue. It's still considered being transgender is officially still an illness. It's a psychiatric illness more than anything. It's the term it is, or at least was when I went through the process. It's called transsexualism in the ICD-10, which is still used still in use. It's called ICD, is International Statistical Classification of Diseases, the edition 10, and the edition 11 is coming up soon, and this is by World Health Organization, and it's F64.0. And in many countries that is the only one way with which you can get treatment. And you have in DSM system from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's 302.85 and 302.6 respectively. The validity of this diagnosis, or the medicalization, or the putting being transgender on the psychiatric disorder or diagnostic spectrum is questionable, and has been questioned for many years now. And for example, in France in 2010, they removed the gender identity disorder as a diagnosis by decree. But according to the French trans activists, beyond the impact of the announcements itself, nothing changed, which I'm not really surprised. But still, it's being transgender, even now in 2021, in medical terms, in the eyes of medicine, that our doctors, transgender people are psychiatrically ill. That's one big thing that needs to be changed. The unnecessary medicalization of trans people needs to be abolished, because it's not an illness. I'd rather not go too deep on this one because this is not a debate show. This is Friday Facts, and here I don't want to go too far on that path. So basically, gender. I talked last week. I talked about the gender dysphoria and autism spectrum. I will make a part 2 of that. As to when, I cannot promise anything, but I will put that is on my list of topics, of which I will make a part 2. I definitely will. And I mentioned that due to the fact that transgender people often they are neuroatypical, and that connects to the mental health care and the importance of that. And there still isn't enough knowledge out there with healthcare professionals when it comes to what it is being trans. And if you have any medical healthcare professionals, whether it be nurses, doctors, like any healthcare professional in your social circles, I would like to ask you to provide these healthcare professionals with appropriate information, whether it be leaflets from local associations or non-profit organizations and clinics, and provide them to these medical professionals, so that they may when they treat, possibly come across a transgender patient, they might know how to treat or how to encounter these people more appropriately, shall we say, or more professionally, as to how and ask them to look out for extra training, because many trans people are afraid to go to the doctors in fear of judgment. Now, I think the legislation has been a really difficult thing, or hard, or shall we say tough nut to crack over the decades, because as I said, there has been these horrible things that actually in the past some Western countries have put trans people through, just because they are trans. So luckily that laws are changing, but it's not yet perfect. I actually think there is a place for a discussion for when it comes to just this field of this field of this legal side um, of trans people or LGBT plus, and it's probably worth talking about. And on Monday, I will be having a Monday news episode with a wonderful guest from the United States of America to talk about some horrible news we've been receiving from Alabama with regards to healthcare. But I will go into more details about this on Monday. Now I will be putting you on hold. I will be right back. And I am back. Hello. Now, I think I'll just run you through through some things I find interesting from the legislative part of this whole issue. Now, from Europe, as I went through this particular point with trans atheists a while back, but excuse me, that when we talked about the approach, when I trans atheist, then I talked about the approach to transgender issues in Europe in recent times. As we went through it, we saw a map on as to where a mental health diagnosis is still required, and there are 36 countries. This is what it's like being trans even in Europe. And the European Court of Human Rights stated that yes, so 36 countries still require the mental health diagnosis, 20 still require sterilization, and Finland is one of those countries. In Finland, what we refer to as trans law requires a certificate from the hormone clinic of a university hospital where we are treated. 2 university hospitals do this in Finland, and a certificate of infertility is required. So basically, for which 1 year of hormone treatment is considered to be enough, and that would be considered a hormonal sterilization. And the European Court of Human Rights ruled that that requiring the sterilization, whether it be clipping the tubes or hormonal sterilization, for legal gender legal for legal gender recognition violates human rights, and this would have been in 2017, yes. And in all two examples from Europe, Denmark, Denmark has made it possible for adults to without going after a 6-month reflection period, or real life treatment, really what you call it, to have their legal gender and their social security number changed to match their gender identity, and this would be without the requirement of medical or social treatment, divorce, castration, psychiatric evaluation, and the sets. And the German Federal Constitutional Court ruled that the civil law status or status law must allow a third gender option, which is quite a big thing, and this means that the German government, as far as I'm aware of, the German, but you will probably let me know in the chat or the comments. But as I understand, as far as I can tell, Germany is the first European country to acknowledge or allow or legalize a third gender, which would mean that the birth certificates in Germany will not have a blank entry for intersex people, and so on. But this is very good for example, intersex people. In Canada, it's over the legal jurisdiction over the matter is in the hands of the provinces and territories, and this includes the legal change of gender classification, meaning male female. However, what was called the Bill C-16, after it was passed in the Parliament, in the House of Commons and Senate, it became law that it updated the Human Rights Act in Canada, as well as the Criminal Code, to include gender identity and gender expression as protected grounds from discrimination, hate publications, and advocating for genocide. And think about that. And that was in 2017, I think. They ruled this. Prior to this, even in a country like Canada, it was legal to do such things. So the legal side of being transgender is still difficult or touchy. It's a touchy topic in many countries, including Germany, even in such modern countries as Germany and Canada and Denmark. But this, I will be going in, shall we say, 5 minutes maybe, and I would love to have comments from you, lovely lot, before I go. I hope you really did like this episode of Friday Facts. Uh, I will come out with a new topic next week and I will publish it uh, the previous evening at latest. Uh, Always, I aim to put the stream out, to create the stream and put it out beforehand, 24 hours before the actual showtime. Now on Monday, or next week, Monday, the it's March 22nd, with my one day news broadcast, I will have a guest on Monday and this guest will be announced a bit later, and they will come and talk with me for a brief for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour or so. I can't promise how long they will be on, but I hope at least for a good chunk of time on Monday, when we discuss a really big thing that has now come out of Alabama in United States of America. But hey, please, there are few people watching as of right now, so I would love to hear from you. Any questions, comments before I go. I'll give you a moment, and I would also like to, at this point, I would love to remind you that as of yet, at the time of streaming, 61.2% of the viewers of this channel are not subscribed. So please, if you like this stream and my other content, go check it out. I have interesting content with some wonderful guests, as for example Arthur, who popped into the chat previously, and so yes, at the moment 61.2% of my viewers are not subscribed to this channel, and I would please subscribe. It really helps. As well as, if you do not subscribe, if you don't feel like it, you don't have to, but I would really appreciate it. But just if you don't feel like subscribing, just leave me a like, thumbs up or thumbs down. Both will help the algorithm. So we have been here just over an hour. I think it's time for us to go. It's time for me to love you and leave you for this evening, or maybe another time of day. I don't know if it's evening for you. Good day, good morning, good night, good morning, good afternoon. Now it's time to say goodbye. See you on Monday.